Right, so my name is Patrick Smyth. I'm a graduate student in English and digital fellow at the Graduate Center, CUNY. And I'm an inveterate tinkerer, I guess you could say. And you can sort of follow along with what I'm going to be saying. I have it's a GitHub repository, which is basically like a pretty easy to read website, but when you go there, you have to scroll down a little to see the writing. And you just go to bit.ly/blind hackers. Okay, and that also has the link there to the presentation as well. I'm going to leave that off for 1 second just so people can go there. And I'm going to switch to the PowerPoint. Okay. So that's bit.ly/blind hackers. All right, so in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of amazing sort of technological trends, advances in technology, some of which are really exciting, some of which are really fun. In fact, I had originally titled this slide "Cool Stuff," but my partner talked me out of that. But a couple things that are really getting people excited right now. I mean, I'm leaving a lot out, obviously. One is the maker movement. So that is sort of mini computers. There's a lot of advances around that area. So one thing that's really hot right now is Raspberry Pi, which is a $35 mini computer. There's a picture of one later, but it basically it's the size of a credit card. You can do all sorts of cool projects at home with it. People are really excited about that. And also Arduino, which allows you to create sort of different kinds of hardware projects. Of course, there's also digital books, which I think a lot of you are probably familiar with. We've already talked about them today. They sort of have changed the way people read, and the platforms around them have also changed how people buy books, how people sell books, and the kind of books that get made. That's really exciting. And then there's also, of course, augmented reality, which is maybe the sort of the hottest one right now, though I don't know how long that's going to last. Or at least in terms of Pokemon Go, which is maybe you've heard of that, but it's this great sensation, and it uses this augmented reality technology. And augmented reality, I'm sorry if I'm speaking really fast, I'll try to slow it down. But augmented reality is essentially using some kind of digital interface that overlays the world around you, and basically, so it's not necessarily complete virtual reality, but it's sort of changing how you're interacting with your day-to-day. Okay, so these are some cool technologies, but are people with disabilities, people with who access technology through more unorthodox means, are we being left behind by a lot of these things? So just to go through the technologies that I talked really quickly about there, the Raspberry Pi, unlike platforms we're probably used to like OS X, VoiceOver, Windows has some not very good built-in stuff, but like obviously it has JAWS, it has NVDA, has a sort of ecosystem. If you boot up Raspberry Pi, you're not going to get, at least out of the box, I'm going to talk about that, you're not going to get any speech, you're not going to get any voice interaction, and also many other, there's other accessibility problems, mobility, accessibility, and stuff like that. We were talking augmented reality. Well, if you wanted to play Pokemon Go and you use Apple's VoiceOver or TalkBack on Android, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to play it. So you might hear a few words when you boot up the game, but you're not going to hear anything else after that. And then digital books, they've really revolutionized how blind and low vision people read, how they have access to reading, to literature, and to things that people take for granted every day. But the hard part of that is, of course, DRM, digital rights management, which is the bane of accessibility with ebooks. So if you buy a book from Google Books, if you buy a book from Amazon, it can be actually quite tricky to read that in your preferred environment. Depending on your setup, depending on your screen reader, you might have a really hard time with that. And then there's other book services that are getting really big right now. Scribd, looks like Scribd, S-C-R-I-B-D. Basically, it's trying to be the Netflix of books. But you go to that website, you sign up, you're like all excited to read your million books or whatever, and guess what? It's just a bunch of PNGs, it's a bunch of images, so you're out of luck. Completely inaccessible. So, there's a lot of ways we try to address this stuff, and I think people at this conference have really, inspired me in these areas. We have advocacy, with people fighting to change laws to have ADA implemented in a better way, a more thoughtful way. We have education, so we're learning about what it means for a site to be accessible, what it means for it to be inaccessible, trying to get big companies to adopt more accessible practices, and also, of course, the smaller websites as well. And then, of course, we have technology is of course, the way forward, right? But as we've also talked about a lot today, it's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or maybe 4 steps back in some cases. So, technology can both be a way to gain access, but, since new frameworks, new technologies, new things to do are always appearing, we're kind of always doing accessibility whack-a-mole and trying to get people to sign on, to do the things that it seems like we've already taught them to do in the past, we've already advocated for. Okay, so I'm going to propose maybe, or not propose, since this is something people are already doing, but I want to talk about sort of another approach. In some ways, I would say it's a more limited approach to accessibility. I think these are really like that. These are the real, earth shakers. But here's another approach, I think, and that's accessibility. Hackccessibility, okay? So that's maybe a little buzzwordy, okay? But what do I mean by hackccessibility, okay? I mean, what happens when you are, say you have to you're writing your thesis. So this has nothing to do with my own personal experience, okay? As a graduate student. So you're writing your thesis, and you have to read, say, the 80 or 90 books that you're going to need to read for that. And some of the books are, in the library. I've never been scanned in before. Some of the books are, are in online, some of these online vendors and stuff, but, in completely inaccessible format. Other books, you might give it to you in a format that they say is accessible, but not by your definition. And then, you have to find some way of pulling these all together and presumably into some sort of unified place so you can actually keep them all organized, and then read them. So what would you do then? So, of course, these people, we need to advocate, we need to educate, but, if you have to do something tomorrow, then sometimes you need to turn to other means, okay? So what I want to talk about, I'm sorry, that was accessibility. So what I want to talk about is, and first, I want to clarify something. So when I say hackccessibility, I'm talking about blind hackers. What do I actually mean by hacker, this term hacker? So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but hacker is it's a bit of a fraught term. It's been around a long time. It means very different things to different people at this point. It arose in sort of a culture that grew up around the MIT AI Research Lab and also a model train club that ran it at MIT. A lot of people who were involved with were very involved in the early computing scene. So, and basically what it meant was somebody who is sort of an expert in a problem domain or a technology, or somebody who has sort of a very free-form exploratory approach to technology and programming in particular. And also, in that circumstance, it did also mean somebody who would use those things in some cases to gain unauthorized access to computers. Of course, at that time, it was not actually illegal to do that. So it was a bit of a different milieu. And in fact, old school hackers, people who use this word in the original sense, they don't like to use that word anymore because it's considered to be disreputable and stuff like that. So really what we're looking at is 2 different definitions of the word hacker. So one basically meaning somebody who is a tinkerer, an exploratory technologist, okay? Or also somebody who's passionate about something, but not because they're getting paid for it, because they really love it, okay? Especially technology. And then on the other hand, so that's the first kind here. And then on the other hand, we have what we do now think of hackers today, which that sort of term came around in the 90s. That basically means, when there was these hackers, Kevin Mitnick, war games, people were thinking that people were going to launch nuclear warheads with their dial-up modems and stuff like that. So that was a new term that came about, and the news and mass media that's the term. They picked up this term hacker, which had a more wide open meaning, and they sort of narrowed in on essentially what we would call today a black hat hacker. somebody who works in information security, but on the bad side, on the bad team, okay? So that's really what people think of as hackers today. Some people who would have considered themselves hackers before probably wouldn't use that word anymore. But a lot of people still use the word in the original sense. Hacker News is one of the big famous programming websites and so on. So people self-describe themselves as hackers, and people will describe other people as hackers as a term of appreciation. They'll be like, oh, he or she is a hardware hacker. She's a Lisp hacker. He's a Python hacker, okay? So that basically means, hey, that person knows what they're doing with that technology. That person's really into that technology. Okay. So really what I want to talk about a little bit is in the community, in the blind and low vision community, people who have come up with hacks with different approaches, tools, whatever, methods, but who have a little bit of this hacking feel, a little bit of this hacking philosophy. Basically, these projects have allowed people to do things. In some cases, I'm going to show you things that have to do with Linux. So, and I might, if we have a little time, we'll talk about, maybe getting bootstrapped into doing stuff with Linux. I think it's a really, if you can start to use it, there's a little bit of a learning curve. But because it's so malleable, it's so hackable, it's so changeable, it's really a great environment for accessibility, for getting access to things. And for doing things that are a little outside the box, which is a lot of what we're trying to do here. There are some issues with getting used to it at the beginning, but I think they do pay off over time. So first project, on that note, the first project I'd like to talk about is something called Talking Arch. And I have, this has worked. Sorry. All right, so I just want to pass this around. So this is, and it's not going to look like much, but it's going to sound awesome. So basically, Talking Arch is a live USB. So it's it's an image, basically an operating system. You put it on a USB stick, and then you can just stick it in a computer and boot from the USB, and then it comes up talking. Okay, so it comes up, it's talking to you right from the get-go. There's no menu options, whatever. It's just talking. Of course, this is a command line environment, so it requires a little bit of knowledge. But this is really amazing if you're work in technology, you work with hardware. I'm just going to pass it around. So these are pretty sturdy little computers. So, and I would like to thank Kevin Ferguson at Queens College, who kindly lent me these computers today. I work with him in the writing program at Queens College. So if you just pass that around, basically if you just type in, it'll echo things back to you. And then whenever you enter a command successfully, try echo hello or something like that. And then it'll say hello back to you. Okay, that's one thing you could say. There's obviously a lot more you can do than that. But, and then, so that's really awesome for people who want to get it set up with Linux. And especially on new hardware that they haven't had a chance to change up their environment yet. And it gives them sort of an environment to bootstrap their way into setting more things up, okay? The next thing is a Raspberry VI. So earlier I was talking about Raspberry Pi. So Raspberry VI is essentially, like Talking Arch, it's essentially images, so modified versions of the Raspberry Pi OS. That are then put on SD cards, and you put it into the Raspberry Pi. So you know what, I'm going to switch sorry for the pictures. For this part, I'll switch the colors around. So basically, just like with Talking Arch, you use the Raspberry VI images, and it comes up talking. But Raspberry VI, I think it's a little more than that. So I actually asked some people on the Raspberry VI mailing list about this presentation, and they suggested some great topics that I'm talking about. And so it's a community as well. It's a community of blind hackers, enthusiasts, people who are knowledgeable in this area, and people who care about accessibility sort of come together around this new and exciting technology, and a technology that is actually really useful for creating projects for blind and low vision people, including, say, for example, OCR technology, so you can take a picture and it'll read it to you, or different kinds of servers that you can have in your house that'll keep track of things, sort of Internet of Things, things that can make your life a little bit easier if you're blind or low vision, these kinds of projects. And on a similar note, Blind Arduino, this is an amazing blog and community around Arduino, which is in a similar vein. It's mini computers that are used to create various hardware projects. So people have started to create projects like electronic canes. So basically using rangefinders that will sort of give you audio feedback based on spatial information. And there's a lot of sort of recipes for these online. And some people have built them. You can look around. But this kind of technology is really exciting because it sort of allows blind and low vision people to sort of try to create some of their own physical tech to try to make their lives a little bit easier. Okay? Then, so this is kind of an interesting one on the subject of augmented reality. So remember, that's kind of what Pokemon Go is an example of, augmented reality. This is called, I think it's pronounced VOICE because it's OIC. But I'm just going to call it the voice for now. But the voice, basically it is, and this is a very nascent thing. It's really more interesting as like a proof of concept or something like that. I'm not sure how much practical use it has right now, but it's somewhat promising. But basically the idea is it's software that processes images and renders them as sound. So it does have seem to have some use cases. So for example, using it, it's pretty easy to tell if you're using a camera and walking around with it. It's pretty easy to tell if you're near a wall or not near a wall, and also sort of the general coloration or like light or darkness of something that you're looking at. It's a little hard to the more complicated the images, the harder it is to discriminate. So the image here. Sorry, I'm not describing a lot of these. In some ways, I ignore images a lot myself, so I'm not really focusing on images here. But this image that is on the screen here, the other ones were really just logos and stuff like that. But this one is a very low-res image of a face. So with this technology, if it's a simple black and white image, if you're trained a little bit, you're supposed to be able to make it out. And also simple moving objects, like an object moving from left to right across the field of vision, is supposed to sort of be evident from after you're trained listening to it. Okay. It's a very nascent thing, but I think it could be interesting. I think that there's room for this. I think there's room to combine some of these ideas and have audio input based on lasers or sonar, rangefinders, stuff like that. It's very early areas. It's really shocking to me that there hasn't been more done in this area, but I think there will be more done. I think there's a lot of room for interesting research and playing around, exploration using this. So then this is one that I really found amazing. And this is the image here is of a game of Pokemon with two Pokemons fighting each other. Or Pokemon, I guess is the plural. Sorry. I did play Pokemon when I was a kid. I'm not that ignorant of Pokemon. So you have here, so basically this is Pokemon Crystal Access. This is a game for Game Boy Advance. Came out many years ago, I think around 2000. But has been completely inaccessible for basically that entire time, as is pretty much every Pokemon game, not accessible. But a awesome blind hacker named Tyler Spivey released some code that was written in Lua that uses the NVDA screen reader in conjunction with an emulator, which allows you to play this game on your PC. That actually lets you play this game accessibly. And it'll read you where you are on the map. It'll read, your interactions with menus. And actually, you know what? It's a little boring it's actually much cooler to see it in action. So I'm going to quickly run the game. So what this is doing now is it's creating a full Windows operating system inside the Linux environment. So we're actually booting up Windows inside Linux using a technology called VirtualBox, virtualization technology. So this is now, we're in Windows now, kind of. And so now what we're looking at is the Pokemon game. And you got a little guy in the middle. And you have a room, and I guess that's all furniture or something. And you can move around. You could hit, it might not be, I don't think it's going to come over the audio, but I could turn it up. Hang on. Close to it? Yeah. Okay, hang on. Okay, that might come over the stream, but basically when I hit R, it reads the location of where you are on the screen in relation to the other objects. So it basically says, so it's saying, oh, up 7, for example, like, oh, that's my location in relation to another object on the screen. And as you walk around, for example, it'll read you withdraw item, deposit item, and so on. So the character's using the computer, okay? So this is a game that was cool, right? This is a game that was completely inaccessible, that if you were a blind person and you booted this game up, it would be completely unusable. And because of the scripts that he wrote for this game, now it's an accessible game. And I'm not sure, I don't know if anyone's played it to the end using his scripts. Apparently, it gets a little tougher toward the middle, but you know, I think it's very cool, and it shows kind of what I'm talking about, this kind of hacker ethos, okay? And I'm going to get rid of this. So sorry, goodbye, Windows. Just kind of getting used to that music, actually. All right, so that's Pokemon Crystal Access. And then, so I want to talk really quick about Emacs Speak. So this is another, this is a screen reader for a text editor called Emacs. And Emacs, sort of like the word hacker, sort of has a long history. It's a text editor that has been compared to an operating system. So you know, it's ostensibly for just writing text files, but you can check your email in it. You can surf the web. You can, well, actually, let me open Emacs really quick. And type Tetris. Tetris. Okay, so you can play Tetris in it. You can know phases of, you can get the phases of the moon. You know, so it's essentially the ultimate Swiss Army knife. And everything, it's basically, it's a little ridiculous to have it on the screen, so I'll get rid of it. Okay, but it's essentially the ultimate Swiss Army knife, and it is a environment that is completely based on text. It is the ultimate sort of text-based environment. Maybe besides the Bash, the command line, which is another amazing text-based environment on Linux and also on OS X. But it's not really accessible out of the box. So Emacs Speak is a great piece of software created by an engineer formerly at Google called Raman. His last name is Raman, and it allows you to navigate around in Emacs and use all the features that you could use before. And it's targeted primarily at completely blind users, and it uses something called an audio desktop. So it has different audio cues, not just speech, that allow you to see where where you are and interact with it. And then I want to show you a variant of it. It's not really a variant, but this is something I created over the summer. So I'm not completely blind. I'm low vision. So Emacs Speak is awesome, but I wanted to be able to turn it on and off. I didn't want to only ever have the voice on. So I created a simple screen reader in the Lisp programming language for Emacs called eLoud. So that's in my GitHub repository. I'll give you my GitHub if you want to see the source code. But basically, I'll show you a really quick demo of it. To open Emacs again. But basically, you can turn it on, you can turn it off, and then once it's on, as you move around in the environment, you can read things by letter, by word, by sentence, by line, or the whole document. So, yeah, gonna turn it on. I don't know, can you hear that?
If you want to create a file, visit at file with CFC and enter
So
the
if you
text
move
in
by line, it'll read the line.
And enter the text in at.
So it'll be reading by word.
Visit on the file with CFCF. V-I-S-I-T.
Visit V-I-S-I-T. So it'll read by letter. And also, if you navigate around to a file. So I'll quickly navigate into the folder for this presentation.
Okay, projects.
A-C. Oh, no. So this is the folder for my presentation. We can go to the presentation
BS presentation.
and see the presentation.
HTML. Meta equals.
That's actually the PowerPoint for the it's not PowerPoint. It's something called reveal.js, but that's actually what it looks like in HTML. Okay. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna unfortunately I think have to skip over this, but this is DRM, which is an amazing technology for removing DRM from ebooks. I suggest that if you're interested in this, come up and talk to me afterward. Probably everyone is going to want to talk to me about that. I don't know how I would have gotten through my PhD without that technology. Thank you. Okay, I just want to talk really quick about some of the wider implications of this. So I think there's connections between hacktivism and accessibility, or hack-accessibility, as I'm talking about here. The idea of hacktivism is that you use sort of circumvention, sort of more things that might be unethical in other contexts, to sort of go ahead and do stuff that maybe society doesn't want you to do, but it's the right thing in this case. And really, this is a super controversial idea. Edward Snowden is probably a great example of a hacktivist, a whistleblower, right, who went against what the authorities wanted him to do. But many would say, obviously not all, many would say that it led to a good outcome. And another interesting thing that's happening right now, increasing sort of openness in society and greater access to knowledge, is Sci-Hub, which is essentially a massive repository of scientific texts that has been created, and sort of helping with issues like the reproducibility crisis in science. And let me switch back real quick. So okay, and I just want to say really quick that I think as accessibility advocates, as people who are disabled, especially speaking in particular about the blind and even blind developers, blind programmers, that it's an interesting position to be in because is interesting to people. People care. If you tell them about some of these like hacks, not only are they helping people, but I think they do something to increase awareness. That hey, big company, Amazon face Google Book. If you make something inaccessible, then if this one person managed to turn around and made it accessible, then why didn't you do that? You have billions of dollars at your disposal. Really, it takes away the excuse, I think, in a way. And also, it does help people. Like these projects, they allow people to bootstrap into an environment like Linux, which is great, but is not initially accessible. So, it's a little bit of a trailblazing thing where like you go first, and then hopefully you create a path for other people. And I just want to leave with talk about one person. These are some principles. I think the first one being text. Text is very accessible. That's one great way to be open. But fundamentally, I think it's about persistence. Okay, and I just want to leave you with talking about one person. This is a man named Terry Garriott, and he is a blind computer gamer, and he played through the Legend of Zelda, which is a classic computer game, a 3D computer game, which is completely inaccessible. And just by trial and error, using stereo sound, he managed to get through the entire game. It took him actually 5 years. So, but he was, this is something he really wanted to do. He loved this game, and he just really wanted to do it. So, I mean, I hope that it's not always as hard as this, and it really shouldn't be. But, if we have persistence, if you do fall back in some cases on self-reliance, but also on the community around you, then things can happen. You can get your goals done. You can inspire other people to do similar things. And I think the more that we do in this area, the easier it is to do more. Okay. And then please get in contact with me. My Twitter is psmyth, SMY as in yellow, TH01 at Twitter. And then my GitHub, which is where coders keep their source code, is Smyth, SMYTH, P. And then my email address is Patrick, PATRICK, SMYTH01 at gmail.com. And also remember, you can read it, you see the presentation and everything on your own computer, and some notes that I took, and including links to all of these projects at bit.ly/blind hackers. And thank you so much. Any questions? I don't know if we have
Go
time.
ahead, no,
Yeah.
we'll take 2 minutes.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
I have one.
Go ahead.
What would be some blind hacker activities that you recommend to check out?
Yeah, Blind Arduino, the Blind Arduino blog, the Raspberry VI mailing list is really, that's one I'm on. It's a really amazing one. And I would also say, I'm not as familiar with it, I just joined, but there's also a Voice, VOICE mailing list, that's for the augmented reality. And then there's also ones for audio games, you know, as opposed to video games. There's a website called Audio Games, and that's also a hangout, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Anything else?
What question in the back?
Anywhere?
There's actually one more community for blind accessibility testing called BATS.FYI. BATS standing for Blind Accessibility Testing Society.
Cool. That's
That's
FYI. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there's something called Eyes Free, part of Google. So you can get some valuable stuff that's community there as well.
Great. All right, thank you very much. Yeah.